morning, good morning. Welcome to another fine Wednesday morning. Welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson, he, they pronouns, executive producer, Lightleaf Productions. As you can see, I'm in a remote studio. We'll see how this goes today. Um, Coming to you live from the West Coast, so it's a little bit earlier here, but it looks like we have a fine show for you today anyway. Um, Weather here isn't that great, but it is the Pacific Northwest, so it is what it is. I'm gonna enjoy bringing the show anyway. Today we have special guest Cubby Altabelli. As soon as he gets here, we'll be talking $44 million. Everyone says I'll quit when I start to slide, and one morning you realize you've done slid. Um, that's a quote from Sugar Ray Robinson. You always say, I'll quit when I start to slide, and then one morning you wake up and realize you've done slid. Of course, realize he was talking about boxing, but really applicable to a lot of things. Um, this month it is now November, and November is Alzheimer's Awareness Month. The reason why I chose the Jackie Robinson quote, the Sugar Ray Robinson quote, is because my grandfather has Alzheimer's or had Alzheimer's. He recently passed, and I'd just like to acknowledge him here on this broadcast. He's one of the reasons why I do anything I do, always an inspiration to me. Um, uh, and the source of my black culture. He was a black man. He was born in Kentucky, lived through World War II, and uh, grew up in the South. Still found it valuable to serve his country in the armed forces. Um, Served in the U.S. Army at the end of World War II and through the Korean War. And then yeah, I always bring up his example when I start talking about the impossibility of us as a generation doing anything like previous generations did, because he retired from the army after several tours of duty, and then became a delivery person for candy machines. So those candy machines, coin op machines that you put, well, now you put your credit card up to, but they have the little spinning thing and they push candy down into a trough where you can pick it up. Um, with that, as his sole source of income for his household, he was able to buy a house, have five children, bring them up in relative comfort, have two cars and an RV and a boat practically the entire time I was alive. I've been alive. I know um, he had those things before, long before I was born. I'm 16 years younger than my youngest uncle. So, I just find it fascinating that that was the expectation, and the ability for a worker in the 1960s and 70s. You could expect that you could have a house without multiple incomes, and you could have recreation for a household via camping and boating without multiple sources of income. And you could have all these normal things, uh, But yeah, anyway. Yeah, he had Alzheimer's, dementia before he passed, and yeah, it's a good thing to be aware of. Be aware that Alzheimer's is a disease that affects many, many people, and that folks, uh, you know, suffering Alzheimer's are just like the rest of us, and that uh, even though Alzheimer's is a debilitating disease, that the people who are suffering from Alzheimer's um, just are just the way they were before their diagnosis. Uh, it may be difficult at times to get along with them or talk with them, but they are still your loved ones. And so, yeah, I hope we were able to impart, bring him some good moments in his final days. My family was able to visit him last year, and hopefully, yeah, that contributed to his life. At any rate, yeah, one of the some of the topics for today, um, we want to talk. Hold on one second. I lost track of them. Let's see here. We've got. Let me pop it up. I know we've got. We're going to be talking about Polly Reese's show, and the Uncommon Good podcast. Thank you. And we've got Twitter and Elon. We've got Mail-In Balance. We've got Cliffside Park, New Jersey, and all of that, and whatever we happen to stumble upon. I recently went to a recording session with Polly Reese. He has the Uncommon Good podcast. Great podcast if you feel like taking the time to listen. Available on Spotify, Apple, etc. Wherever you get your podcast content. Just give it a subscribe. It's not it isn't something that you have to pay for. And you get to hear great guests like me. I was listening back to my recording and realizing exactly how much I pause and think, which is hilarious for a host. Um, yeah, I pause and think a lot. I guess it's just part of my shtick, part of what I do. So you guys get to deal with that in listening to me say a lot. Unfortunately, I have no way of really fixing that, it seems. But we did talk a bit about the differences in economics between the 60s and now. And we talked about a few of these other topics, but what I want to transition on to is the topic we covered, Roe v. Wade. I really want to talk about this election in general, and its importance, and make sure folks understand, at least from my perspective, what it is that we're talking about with this election. Whether it's Oz versus Fetterman, whether it's Mastriano versus, you know, the PA gubernatorial race. Uh, Let me pull up the other candidate's name, uh, just because it just went off my head. I have this problem with with names. I don't remember them, and so that's probably a bad thing. But yeah, I can't ever remember names, and so they constantly slip my mind. Shapiro, Josh Shapiro, who has been the Attorney General for Pennsylvania for a number of years, and is now running um, for governor. Um, whether any of these races, really, even just the Republican versus Democrat duopoly that we have, uh, is a referendum on what kind of democracy we want moving forward. Uh, there's always a question of, do we have a democracy? Is this, at the moment, these are bigger questions that are important, yes, but they're well beyond the point. They're well beyond what we're discussing with this election, what our votes will indicate. They're well beyond um, anything that pollsters or politicians will recognize as a referendum in this coming election. What the this coming election, what the and I'm making a prediction here. It may be a wild prediction, but I'm pretty sure about it. What the pollsters and politicians, talking heads, will be interpreting this election after the fact about is either a referendum on the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade, or it will be some random thing like why didn't Democrats show up, or what is the disillusionment in the voting population, or anything. What the price of French hens is on the Facebook Marketplace. So, um, I think it's very, very important, more important than usual, to vote this coming election, because the overturning of Roe v. Wade isn't about abortion. We're going to keep constantly coming back to abortion. That's always going to be the argument, the kind of um, the narrative that the Republican Party wants to sell. It's the narrative that the pollsters want to sell. It makes their life easy. It makes their life very simple to frame it as an argument about abortion. It isn't about abortion. The ruling overturning Roe v. Wade had nothing to do with abortion. It didn't talk about the viability of the fetus. It didn't talk about um, it didn't talk about why Roe was decided the way it was in the first place. It didn't talk about pregnant mothers or a woman's right to choose. It talked about privacy. And that's the argument of the 2020s. That is the political argument that we'll be living with probably well into the 2100s, but it's the right to privacy. If you've ever read the Constitution and the amendments, I'm going to assume you have. If you haven't, give it a read. It's a little difficult, it's a little dense. It takes a lot of going back and rereading and interpreting, but give it a read. If you've ever read it, you can easily develop a set of opinions about what the people writing it at the time were thinking, talking about. And yes, there are inconvenient truths, like they were all slaveholders, they were all white men, they were all landowners. Um, but if you give it a read, they truly were uh, bringing a new way of doing things to politics, well, what they considered a new way of doing things to politics. Many of them, even though they were slaveholders, truly did believe that all men are created equal, truly did believe that, that in equal rights for all, there were even many of them, even though they were white men, who considered women to be important political voices, and who thought that they should be able to own property and that they should be able to have a voice in politics. And so they wrote this document, and it's a hopeful document, and it's an, even by their own words, an ever-changing document. The interpretation of it changes. They understood that the society around it changes, that um, that it needs the ability to be modified because at some point some of these words are not going to be applicable to the future. Um, and they wrote it somewhat pragmatically as well. There's the things like the three-fifths compromise in there. Um, declaring black men three-fifths of a person. That was ostensibly so that uh, the southern states who had larger populations than their voting population weren't counted as population. It was so that the northern states didn't get outvoted on everything right from the very beginning, and we wouldn't remain in this bucolic farmer's paradise, that we could progress past that. All that is to say, nowhere in this document did they write specifically the words that you as an individual have a freedom of the freedom to of your own personal information, a right to privacy. They didn't acknowledge anywhere or enumerate anywhere this right that um, in many ways we all take for granted. We all take for granted that there is a right to privacy, that there's a right to think and decide and make decisions and have thoughts, and determine things for yourself, uh, and to not have other people intrude on those decisions. That's the actual fight of Roe v. Wade. That's the actual fight of a lot of Supreme Court case law that we take for granted. There's a lot of law written on the basis that the ultimate right to freedom is the individual. Um, there's a lot of common law that's written that way as well. And there's a lot of common law that isn't written, that we just all acknowledge. You can't force somebody to say, if a child is dying, give up a lobe of their liver just because you're matched for donation. There's no requirement or ability for the government to require you to register for a donation database. They don't even collect that information when you do become an organ donor, which I highly recommend. It's a great thing. You put it on your license and suddenly you're an organ donor. Great. Be an organ donor. But uh, again, that's your right to choose. You can choose whether or not to be an organ donor. You can choose whether or not to give a lobe of your liver to a dying child. Um, we take those choices for granted, and those choices stem from the right to privacy, the right to choose what you want to choose. Um, so The right to privacy comes into play also when you talk about the right for people of different ethnicities to get married. It comes into play when you talk about the right to vote. It comes into play when you talk about search and seizure. Even though there's a enumerated right to not be unreasonably searched. Uh, there's nothing in the Constitution that says what unreasonable is. Unreasonable is a societal expectation, and unless that's defined, there's no nothing that is unreasonable. Is it unreasonable for the government to read every one of your emails? Is it unreasonable for the government to listen into every phone call you have? Uh, by the ruling overturning Roe v. Wade, the government says it is not unreasonable. Um, now maybe we have something that people are interested in. Maybe this is something that people should be aware of and should be worried about. Um, so, I think that um, it's important that people show up and vote. Even if you don't usually vote, this is a more important election than possibly any presidential election that's ever happened. It's a more important election than many things that we've had in the past, and certainly I understand the opinion that voting doesn't matter, but in this particular case, whether or not you think your vote counts, it's going to matter. It's going to matter in the interpretation of what happened in the aftermath. Not, it might not necessarily even affect who is elected because of gerrymandering and other things like that, but it the one thing that politicians and talking heads and people who read polls and that kind of thing do understand is total vote counts. And they do pay attention to total vote counts and they worry about it, etc. Um, yeah, I would encourage you to vote, even if this is something that you don't normally do. I would encourage you to vote because let's talk about mail-in ballots. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court recently ruled that districts can't count ballots that don't have a date on them. This is the most ridiculous thing ever. I don't know. I don't understand what or why or where this requirement came from. If you go into a polling place and go to vote, you have to sign your voter card. It's a big ledger, um, and you sign next to your name to just provide somewhat proof that you are who you say you are, and B, to provide proof that you voted in person. Um, so that ledger has all the people who are registered to vote and have not requested a mail-in ballot. Um, but it doesn't have a date column. Everybody knows what the date is. It's November 8th. So it doesn't have a date column. There's no date on there. So you're just signing your name. However, when you get a mail-in ballot, you fill out the ballot, which is completely not marked with any identifying information because it's supposed to be a secret ballot. You put it into an envelope, a secrecy envelope, and then you put it into a mailing envelope. On the back of that mailing envelope, there is a space for you to sign your name. There is a number that identifies that particular envelope and who it belongs to, and there's a date line. That date line doesn't actually say what date you're supposed to fill it out. Um, it doesn't require any specific date on it. And legally, you can put anything in there. You could put your birthday. Um, you could put D-Day. You could put the day atomic bombs were set off over Hiroshima. You could put anything. So what relevance does that date have? And this is the legal argument, that because that date doesn't say today's date or doesn't, indicate what date it's supposed to be, and really isn't necessary information. The postmark is the necessary information because you need to know when that was mailed. Because it's not necessary information, you know, people who don't fill it out don't actually need to fill it out, is the legal argument of the folks that are trying to have all mail-in ballots counted. Um, in whatever weird twist of fate that we live in, um, yeah, the party that usually wants personal freedom, which is the Republican Party, seems to not agree with this particular personal freedom. Um, you know, this all goes to bigger requirements to make every vote counted. Um, you know, access to voting is not supposed to be difficult. You're supposed to be able to access voting without, people forcing you to answer questions that aren't relevant to the vote or to your vote. Um, and not asking questions of voters that you don't ask of every voter. So you're not allowed to ask one voter to put down a date, and then not uh, ask that of all voters. You're not allowed to require them to put down a date, and then not require everybody else to put down a date. Similarly, you're not allowed to request they put down a date if the date doesn't matter. Um, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania recently ruled, contrary to this relatively common legal line of thought. They said, no, the date does matter, that if you don't fill it out, it cannot be counted. And so they're having districts keep all of those ballots because they're still valid ballots, but separated from the ballots that do have a date. And we're talking relatively small numbers here. We're talking like 1% of ballots, less than 1% of ballots that are returned. And probably not going to win or lose an election for anybody, but the fear is, by the party of personal responsibility, by the Republican Party, that when you get more votes, uh, Republicans tend to lose. The larger the population that you poll, the less likely it is that a Republican will win a publicly elected position. Um, I guess. I don't understand. If your platform is that weak that it can't stand having everyone vote, rather than trying to block everyone from voting, why not just strengthen your platform? Why not make what you're saying more appealing to voters? Um, I don't know. That's what I do. Again, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe that's not the way to do it. Um, but yeah, looks like I'm getting a message from my associate producer. So, uh, oh, great. My special guest, Cubby Altabelli, is about to log on, and we'll see him momentarily. Um, I did want to talk about Cliffside Park. Speaking of voting, the race for the now open Senate seat. Pat Toomey retiring from politics when he said he would. Uh, I've been trying to get Pat Toomey out of office since before he announced that he wouldn't serve longer than the end of this term. And I find it highly discouraging that we weren't able to get him out of office before now. But he's doing us all a favor. He's retiring from his office. He didn't listen to any of us anyway. All of his constituents were poorly represented by Pat Toomey for many, many years. That being said, there's a race for the Senate seat that will open because he's retiring. And that race is between Oz and Fetterman. Fetterman, as you may or may not know, is the the uh, the was the mayor of a town called Braddock, um, in central PA's coal town. Uh, he is currently the second in line, the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, the second in line to the governorship. And he is a real Pennsylvanian. He's a real guy. He's lived in Pennsylvania his whole life. He's been in Pennsylvania politics pretty much his entire life. And he has made executive decisions. He's participated in local and statewide and national politics. And he is a politician, for better or for worse. I mean, he's also a real guy. He seems to be a pretty down to earth guy. He's not one of those guys that's like, hey, like this is my only job. Like I'm only going to be a politician, even though that has been the focus of his career. Um, he's made mistakes. He has had a stroke. He is having trouble with words and speeches and um, things that actually I have trouble with a lot, and I host a podcast. He's having trouble understanding words as spoken, and he's having trouble with when somebody says something, just processing it into his thoughts and then processing out a response. These are all things that I do all the time. Actually, behind the scenes, in the scenes, you may notice I always make closed captioning available on all my broadcasts as much as I can. Sometimes we have technical glitches. I apologize for those. Behind the scenes, what you don't see is I always enable closed captioning on my own back end on my computer screen facing me. Um, who needs closed captioning when all they're doing is talking? Well, I have guests and they say things, and sometimes I don't process that very quickly. So I actually need closed captioning, and I haven't had a stroke. I find orally processing things sometimes goes very slowly for me. And so I enable closed captioning. I have the full transcript of everything that I've said and everybody else has said up on my screen at all times. And you'll sometimes see my head turn in broadcasts, and I'm looking at multiple various screens to recall things or to look at that transcript or to figure out what it is that I've forgotten to say, even though I just reviewed what I was going to say like less than a half hour ago. Um, you know, this is something that happens to people, whether or not they have a stroke, and so it's something that I can understand. Somebody who's had a stroke might need. Uh, anyway, hey Cubby, I'm gonna bring you up on screen if you want to unmute yourself. I'd like to welcome our special guest, Cubby Altabelli. Say hi, everybody. Oh, I can't hear you. Hang on a second. I don't know why I can't hear you. Mm,
Oh,
oh,
how about now?
yeah, yeah, I can hear you now. Great.
I figured out what happened.
Oh, what happened?
My my headset mic was slightly unplugged.
Ah, great. Well, we can hear you now. How you doing today?
Late, and I apologize.
That's okay. I've just been talking as I do. So yeah. Um,
On a talk show.
I've become one of those talking heads that people talk about. But yeah, so Fetterman versus Oz is what I was going over just now. Um, and just a brief intro of Fetterman, and then Oz. You may know him from TV, TV Doctor, introduced and made popular by Oprah Winfrey. Thanks, Oprah. Um, you're shaking your head, Cubby.
Well, just because I like Oprah,
Yeah.
but she did give us Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil.
What I said to somebody else, I was talking about with this, it's probably one of those cases, and if you've ever been talent on a show, you would understand this. But for those that haven't been on the talent side of a show, you sometimes your producers just throw things at you, and you just like go, oh, okay. And it's probably one of those cases where
Mm.
Oprah was not the one that vetted Dr. Oz or Dr. Phil, and therefore we shouldn't actually blame Oprah, but perhaps she could have done a little bit of vetting.
It just, you try not to let it cover your overall impression of her, but you you kind of can't forget that she did bring help help those two guys with their career.
Yeah, yeah, it's sad. Anyway, aside from being a TV doctor, the reason why I put Cliffside Park, New Jersey in my topics for the day is because he's a resident of Cliffside Park, New Jersey, and has been a resident of Cliffside Park, New Jersey for many years, since he started earning enough money from his appearances on TV to be a resident of Cliffside Park, New Jersey. It's a relatively wealthy area. And it's in New Jersey, which is the key there. He's a New Jersey resident.
Mhm.
So how's he running for Pennsylvania Senate? His wife's family owns a church. I shouldn't say owns. Has been the key members, the founding members of a church in uh, Eastern Pennsylvania. And that church, as many churches do, owns a lot of real estate. And one of those pieces of real estate is this house that is in Eastern Pennsylvania. And this house is a mansion, and it's a historical property. And Dr. Oz bought it. He is actually a medical doctor, so I should put in too strong an air quote, but he is an air quote doctor to me. Um, Go ahead.
I mean, it's worth noting that he's a surgeon.
Yeah, yeah,
He's not a guy that ever had to think about like talking with people or giving them advice or helping them with anything. He's a jock.
mm, yeah. So,
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever watched Scrubs, but he's the Todd. But
I,
but less cool.
I haven't watched Scrubs, but I do know the general division between like labor in the medical fields, and
Hmm.
how surgeons are. I mean, because they're, they're always the ones that win the accolades, when they quote save somebody's life. Anyway, um, but what Dr. Oz isn't is a Pennsylvania resident. He bought this house for $1, from his wife's family. And
Ah,
it's a mansion. It's worth something like $3 million. He bought it for $1, and the deed that he signed in this purchase says that he can sell it back to the former owners, um, up to I think 15 years in the future, and it's as if the transaction never happened. It's a usually a commercial clause, a clause in commercial real estate, so that a land trust can own a property, and then somebody can buy it temporarily to conduct business on it and then give it back. Um, so yeah, um, yeah, yeah, great.
I mean, I'm glad to hear he's not going to become a permanent PA resident.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. Unless he somehow miraculously wins the senatorial election. Oh, please vote. Um, I don't know. I'm stressed. I'm stressed by this whole thing. I find it very distressing.
No, I understand. If he wins, I don't want to be over dramatic, but I might have to kill myself.
No, that's a little far. Don't kill yourself over Oz. Just, I mean, you do what I did. You
No, I just don't.
buy a boat, and then you can just sail away, if he wins.
I don't have money. I don't have boat money.
You have boat money. That was one of the topics we talked about, on Polly's show. The reason why I do some of the things I do is because I like there's this concept like that, like you have to be rich to have a boat, but you don't. I I'd like people to know that, like, you don't have to be rich to have a boat, or to have some of these things that we now consider luxuries. I think that comes from my grandfather. I was talking about my grandfather during the intro of the show. My grandfather recently passed, and he had Alzheimer's, but he in the 60s and 70s, and even into the 80s, was supporting a household of five children and his wife, and he had a boat, and his only salary was that of from retirement from the army, and the salary he got from delivering candy to candy vending machines. Um, so he was a truck driver, basically a delivery truck driver, um, and so I think it's important that we know that there is a way the economy can support everybody, from like basically no income, barely surviving, to middle class, and they can have vacations and what we consider luxuries, like a boat and an RV and cars, and that we can support those people, and they can. There is a world in which that larger percentage of our population has access to all these things, and um it's not, ridiculous. It's not crazy that, and people don't need to change their income. It's it's just we need to modify the economy and our general thought process and make some of these things less precious. And maybe I'm crazy.
I like my gut reaction is that I blame Reagan mostly,
Oh yeah, no, totally.
but I know a few people who you were saying you don't have to be rich to have a boat, and I know a few people who have boats which are ensuring they'll never be rich. But that's a whole different thing. That's like when you're into boats,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
you you probably count. You
yeah.
might be in that
I do count.
particular.
I do count in that. Yeah,
You're
probably.
in that population.
But that's like kind of the divided population of boating in general. Like there are the people that are rich and they have like a new boat, like all with all the bells and whistles, and then there are the people that are not rich and they have a boat, but they're constantly dumping money into the boat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, and that is the dividing line of like people who have boats because like they've made it that far and they can have what they view as luxuries, and then there are the people who just would not really live without a boat.
yeah,
Boat people.
yeah, yeah. I've been called boat people. Um, I don't, I don't know. I find it.
I think it's an affectionate term.
It was an affectionate term. I find it. I find it. I think everybody needs something like this in their life. I find it to be an existential escape. If that's a term. It's something that in my mind, I would never actually be able to do this, but in my mind, if everything went pear-shaped, right? There's a complete collapse of society and government. In my mind, I can provision my boat and go sail to somewhere that isn't completely collapsed, or even just a beach on a desert island somewhere, and survive the rest of my life with very little stuff other than the boat. um, so for some people that's cars. They can drive anywhere. For some people that's planes. For some people that's just walking. Just the ability to walk or support themselves while walking. But yeah, I think everybody needs the mental ability to exit their current situation, and find their way to safety, so to speak.
Mm.
When you're facing an existential crisis, when you're facing stuff outside of yourself that seems so overwhelming that yeah, like that suicide is the answer that you come up with. If you have an escape valve, maybe suicide isn't the answer, because suicide at the end of the day is a self-preservation technique. I don't quite understand all the psychology of it, but there's a lot written about how suicide isn't about any of the things that non-suicidal people think of it as. Like a lot of people think of it as like a selfish act, or like the ultimate in um trying to get your own way or something like that. And when you look into the psychology of it, it's
I
really,
mean, it can be.
it can be what.
It can be. I mean, anything is everything you think it is
Hmm.
ultimately. I mean, suicide can be an act like that. I've just always been suicidal.
Right.
So,
But what I've read
I
about,
mean, like
go ahead.
no, no, it's it's just funny because you're talking about like when life becomes like completely thing, which is I have a brain which kind of allows me to live my day-to-day life in a world that's burning down. Like I'm always in panic mode.
I can.
It's I was gonna say fun, but I was gonna be sarcastic. But it is fun. Like so I'm basically like I day-to-day life is kind of like a dystopian apocalyptic lifestyle for me and emotionally.
Sure.
So I'm okay with like if things get worse, I'm real okay with just checking out personally. But I respect boat people. I think that's a healthier way to deal with that same fear
Well, that's
or
that's what
urge.
I'm saying. I'm saying that the whole, like, everybody needs an escape valve in their brain. Like, mentally, you need this escape valve for this existential dread. Um, Mine happens to be both. Like, um, I mean, yeah, but what I was saying is that suicide is an escape valve for some people. Like, that's what this psychology is of it. Like, that it's preserving yourself by avoiding the existential dread. Yeah. Anyway, um,
Oh yeah, I'm here to confirm. That's basically how I use it.
I think that's how
I
everybody
I
uses
think
it, but I could be wrong.
it's it's very comforting knowing that it's an option.
Hmm. Uh, I mean, not to encourage the option. I don't think it should be an option. I don't use it as an option, but I don't know. Also, not to.
Look, I mean, it always is it's not
Sure,
whether or not we choose whether it's an option. It is always an option.
right. But is there a world in which you change that option, or is that just always going to be the escape valve for you?
Well, I have no idea. That's a much longer term question than I'm prepared to answer at present. It's only been 44, 45 years. So far, it's been pretty consistent.
It's been pretty consistent.
Um, I just I just have to say the thought of Oz winning the election is so existentially terrifying that that many people would just vote for such an awful person that it's just like I don't want to live in a world where he can get elected.
Well,
So it's
I mean, I said the same thing about Trump being elected for a second term. I don't want to live in a country where and I think maybe what I'm doing, where the boat comes into play versus where what you're saying comes into play, is what I do is I localize the I mean, the world is the same worldwide. There's this reach for fascism worldwide. There's this kind of upswing in fascism worldwide, and
yeah.
I too don't like the idea of living in a world where fascism is the popular thought. But then I localize it, and I think I localize it so that I know there's pockets of people who feel the same way as me everywhere, and if I can travel to those pockets, I think that's what makes the world bearable to me, I guess.
That's excellent. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
I just I don't I don't like spending time with myself a whole lot.
I don't like
which
spending
is
time with
which.
myself either. I'm unbearable.
Well, no. Here's the. I I am also autistic, so I am required to spend a lot of time alone.
Mm,
Like I need to spend time alone, and I don't really like that guy,
mm.
which also doesn't help
Right, right. Yeah, it is
things.
difficult.
But specifically, if you hear that I've taken my life this year
Mm.
and Dr. Oz wins this election, though they are related because that is the terror of knowing that more people in PA want to stand by that douchebag. You know what drives me crazy
Mm.
about Dr. Oz? How expensive his jeans look.
It's
He
gene
wears
style.
his jeans. He's in a goddamn Wegner's. He's wearing denim pants and they look like they cost more than any suit I own.
They probably do.
He wears $500 jeans.
They cost probably
Sorry,
cost more than my entire wardrobe, but yeah, I'm the guy that wears graphic tees all the time, so um
yeah,
yeah.
but like that looks normal. That looks fine. You see a guy in a graphic tee, it's like, all right,
Yeah, well, I
dude in a
mean,
t-shirt.
I've
You see a dude in really expensive jeans, it's like, what's going on?
yeah, like why spend that much for jeans? I rarely talk about it, but even my wedding tuxedo, a lot of people spend a lot of money on their wedding tuxedo, but I didn't want to rent it. I wanted to own it, and
Yeah,
um, I picked it up at Philly Aids Thrift for $15, and then I spent $45 having it altered.
nice.
So for under $100 US 7 years ago, I have a tuxedo that is exactly the tuxedo I've always wanted to own, because I picked a tuxedo that was very close in color and shape to and design to the one that I've always wanted to own, and it had lapels that had notches in them, but it had solid silk
Mm,
fabric on the top, and I had the tailor cut the lapels so that they're shawl lapel now. I always wanted a shawl lapel tuxedo,
nice.
and now I have one. Um,
That's that's I mean that's a great tuxedo. That's a great look.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, on the idea of having luxuries for, not non-expensive luxuries. Um, I, I think that
Yeah,
we should always concentrate on the idea of accessing these things that people think of as luxuries, but making them accessible to people who don't have a ton of money. Um,
yes, absolutely. I was in a wedding party once, and we were in a store. Sorry, it's a little bit off
Go
topic,
ahead.
but the store had big sign which was like any suit $80, and we were spending like $200 renting tuxes from this place, and I was like, why don't we just all buy suits together? Like we could all had like matching suits. That would have been badass, and it would have been way cheaper. But it makes it. Have you found some excuses to wear that tuxedo since then?
Oh, tons. Every time I go to a wedding, anybody else's wedding, I wear it. Although I do break it up every once in a while. I own a kilt, and so I'll wear a kilt with other things, rather than wearing the tux. But I wear that. I got a smoking jacket for relatively cheap, and so I wear that. But yeah,
I
it
love a smoking smoking jacket.
Yeah, yeah. It's great. It's perfect. I don't know why that ever went out of fashion. But we should make them popular again. Um,
I agree. I think we should ditch the smoking and keep the
keep the
jacket.
jacket. Yeah, yeah. Ditch the smoking. Keep the jacket.
Yeah.
Um, do you get into sartorial stuff on your show with Shoshi?
We that's a little involved for what we're doing. We'll like bring up projects we're working on in that respect, but we don't work on, I cannot work on complicated things and talk at the same time. So the crafting I do on the crafting show is incredibly basic. Um, because here's the thing, I'm terrible at multitasking. You know why? Because I'm a human being and we're all really bad at
We
multitasking.
are all really
All
bad.
of us.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and
Let's normalize not multitasking.
just focus on what you're doing and finish up with that and then move on to the next thing. It's fun because it's, have you noticed that you can tell when people are on their phone when they're driving?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a particular set of very noticeable, terrible driving things that you do when you're on your phone, and every other car can tell. I think more people who do talk on their phone and drive should know this, that we can tell before we see you because you're driving very badly.
Did did you and on the reverse, you can also always tell when somebody is driving when they're having a conversation with you. You do both tasks very poorly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a worse conversation to boot.
Yeah. Because you can only really respond. You can't actually think through what somebody is saying. Like you can't process it and actually think through it and then create a solution. You can respond to what somebody is saying or asking. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Uh,
I I suspect that because you're so distracted trying to do two things at the same time, you don't notice how bad you are at them because you just don't have the brain power left to notice
to
how
worry about your
bad you're
quality
doing.
control. Um,
Yeah, I think quality control just goes out of the window first.
Speaking of quality control going out the window first, I wanted to cover Twitter and Elon Musk real quick before we get off. Um, Elon, in case you don't follow Twitter news, Elon, or really rich people with insane amounts of money news, Elon Musk bought Twitter for 44, I want to say million. Yeah, $44 million dollars. Not much. Oh, I'm sorry,
Billion,
billion with a
44 billion.
B. I need to change the title of this show
Not,
then. Um, yeah, I typed an M. Uh,
yeah, and it's not his money.
no, it's never his money. Here's how you get rich. I'll give you all a primer on how you get rich. You figure out how to always get other people to pay for everything. That's how you get rich. It's nothing about saving your own money. It's nothing about budgeting. It's nothing about anything. You figure out how to, every time you have to spend money, get somebody else's money to spend. That's how you get rich. Anyway, aside from that rant,
A friend of mine once very smartly pointed out, you never see a millionaire eating their lunch out of an old margarine container.
right, right.
So are they really good with their money?
No, no, millionaires and billionaires are not really good with their money. Um, they're really good at spending other people's money, is what it is. Um, So he spent $44 billion to purchase Twitter. The top executives immediately left when the deal was closed on Friday, and is now Wednesday. As of Monday, most of the executive team had left, and the top programmers had left. And then yesterday, which was Tuesday, Elon dissolved the board of Twitter and became the sole chief executive of all of Twitter. So yeah, yeah, he's now the chief executive of all of Twitter, sole proprietor. He owns it. There's no public trading anymore. I owned shares of Twitter because I do invest. I owned, I believe it was 14 shares of Twitter. I don't mega invest. I don't, like you won't see me on like the stock market reports when I make moves. But yeah, James Jackson today bought 2 shares of Twitter. No, they don't really report that. Anyway, but I do invest, and so Elon paid me $780 of somebody else's money for my shares, which was nice. Um, so I got that. I got that going for me. Got $780.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I like getting Elon's money. I like not spending any money with Elon, so that all works out because yeah, every idea that Elon pushes is a losing proposition, and has no possible good outcome. Just a word for you investors out there. Don't invest in things that Elon is doing because they will eventually fail. Um, unless you're those scammy investors who likes to buy things just before they increase in value and then get rid of them. But yeah.
Ugh, that sounds so if you've been, because I'm on Twitter, but I haven't been following the whole Elon thing very closely for, you know, self-preservation reasons.
Sure, sure.
Did he actually show up with a sink?
Yeah. Yeah, he showed up to the Twitter offices with he said it was a kitchen sink, but it looks suspiciously like a bathroom sink to me. Um,
I mean,
and
obviously it's going to be a bathroom sink. They're more portable.
yeah, you can carry it by yourself. I've installed kitchen sinks, and you can't carry those unless they're aluminum. You can carry the aluminum ones, but and even the stainless steel ones, but the actual ceramic sinks, they weigh a lot. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I have one in my house. I installed it, so I know this weighs a lot. I smashed my finger a couple times. Anyway, um, but yeah, he was carrying a sink. I'm going to go ahead and call it a bathroom sink, but all in service of making possibly the worst pun. And I'm sure you will appreciate the pun, Cubby, but I don't appreciate it just because it was Elon making it. He tweeted the
Well,
video.
well,
Go ahead.
I don't appreciate it because I've seen the same meme that he has.
Oh, I don't know what the meme is. Well,
There's it's a bad Photoshop on a sink and a door that people will put down if somebody says let that sink in,
yeah.
and they'll be like, I just let him out.
Uh, so yeah, he made the
Yeah,
pun.
it's not even.
He tweeted the pun. Yeah, no, here's another hint for
Yeah,
investors. No idea is originally Elon Musk's idea. He's really good at stealing ideas and claiming them for his own, but he is not a good originator of ideas. Oh, anyway.
yeah. Which is I don't know. It seems really weird because he doesn't seem like a guy that's ever had an idea.
He's not. He hasn't. He
Yeah,
comes from wealth. He comes from an apartheid mining family in South Africa. Um, I don't even know that he's naturalized to the United States, but he now lives in the United States in amongst a bunch of other wealthy expats from South Africa, um, who are all very documented apartheid supporting former South Africans. And they all live in this little area in California and spend their wealth that they extracted from the South African community on frivolous things. Um, so yeah, yeah, that's who he is. Not not a genius and not a billionaire investment expert or anything of the sort. Um, Much like Trump, he's taken his family's fortune and translated that into borrowing a lot of money. So he probably has a higher debt load than you and me put together, and probably most of the Eastern Seaboard. Um, Definitely a higher debt load than everybody that earns less than, say, $250,000 a year. But um, yeah, and by everybody who earns less than $250,000 a year, I mean globally, not just, because he owes $44 billion after purchasing Twitter to somebody. He owes all the money that he's ever used to purchase Tesla, to purchase SpaceX. Um, he owes all that money in loans. Like his debt load is massive. The only reason like his valuation says that he's worth X number of $1 billion is because of the investment value of his companies. So anyway,
so that's pretty theoretical. Because I do got to say a big lesson because the whole kerfuffle on Twitter was uh I read a lot about all of the weird moves he had to do just to access the loans to buy Twitter. Even though he's worth all this much, he can't access like any of it
right,
legally.
because it's not his money.
Yeah, like I don't know, just does not seem like a good life,
Mhm.
I guess is my take.
Yeah.
These billionaires.
Well, I don't have to live it, therefore I'm not worried about it. If that's not even my goal, I don't think. So
I would be very shocked if your goal was to become a billionaire.
my only goal in amassing wealth would be to form a company that literally takes apart other companies that are doing negative social and environmental things. So you know how in the 80s people formed companies to aggressively buy out other companies and then part them out, like dissolve them and part them out?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where the era of the hostile
Well, that's
takeover and like, reneging on uh, retirement pensions and stuff like that. That's where that all came from. Like they would buy a company that was over invested, like overvalued in the pensions that they had on their books, but then weren't bringing in enough in product wise that they looked good on the books for investors. So you would go in and you would buy that company for pennies on the dollar of what the real value is, because the real value is in all the equipment that they own and all the stock that they own. So You would buy the company for less than what its actual value is, and then sell off all the parts and disband the company so that you don't have the pension debt, because you dissolve the pension debt in bankruptcy. So you basically dissolve the whole company and get out of this pension debt. So my idea is form a company.
It's so depressing.
Yeah, it is. But my idea, if you can have hope for something, is form a company, and what we do is figure out a way to devalue companies that are um, that are doing negative things. So, like the tobacco companies, when they take a huge hit, on their investment value because there's a negative report released, we go in and buy up half the company and then dissolve it.
Mm.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a great idea.
yeah.
Namor the Submariner used to do that in the comics.
I don't know.
There was a time in the like early 90s when he like amassed he was like he just got together all of the sunken treasure of the ocean and just started buying polluting companies
Mm,
and shutting them down.
nice.
And it was a great thing because it was just like totally legal. And what can you do?
All right. Well,
That's a superhero comic I would read.
yeah.
Just just a super rich guy shutting down terrible companies.
We maybe that can be the anti-hero that we build for a production. I still need you to write that anti-hero script for me.
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, that's okay. I haven't really had time for it, so it's fine. All right. It is 8:19 here on the West Coast. It is what, 11:19 on the East Coast. Um, we've gone over.
It is. You're on the West Coast?
Yes, yes. I'm visiting my mother, and also doing some stock photography.
Ooh.
But yeah. Um, so being that we are 20 minutes over, I'd like to respect your time and respect everybody else's time. And let's segue out of today's show. Um, any last thoughts from you, Monsieur Altabelli?
Please, everyone vote for Fetterman.
if
I just
if nothing else, then to just keep that lovely face of yours around for a bit longer.
I think we can all agree that we just don't want to ever see Dr. Oz's smug face give a
A victory
like
speech about anything?
yeah,
Yeah, no.
yeah.
Yeah. Like even if he
I
ran for dog
I don't
catcher,
have anything. Oh, he'd be such a terrible dog catcher. Could you imagine him touching a dog
well, apparently
in
he
those
killed a bunch of
expensive
dogs
jeans?
as part of an experiment. Uh, he had a lab full
Yeah,
of.
but it's not like he killed them.
I have no idea. He was responsible, so supposedly.
I mean, he was responsible, but he's the kind of guy who pays somebody to
Oh yeah,
to
no,
commit
no.
those
Why
things
would
for
I
him.
mean like why would he get his hands dirty? He's got to save those hands for surgery.
Exactly.
Anyway, all right. So that's a please vote for Fetterman from Cubby. That's a please vote from me. I don't care who you vote for, but please vote because statistically, if you vote, you're going to be voting Democrat anyway. And so I appreciate more people voting and just, voice your opinions, whether you agree with me or not, that this is a referendum on Roe v. Wade. It's still important.
and and possibly democracy in America.
Yeah, yeah. And at least the right to privacy. That's, you know, if you care at all that you get to make any decision by yourself, let's vote and protect that right to make your own decisions. Uh, anyway. All right. On that positive, happy note, appreciate you, Cubby. Appreciate you joining us. I'm gonna leave you on screen as I talk us out of this episode. Um, I appreciate everybody for joining us today. And yeah, good episode. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/lightbeefproductions. I haven't moved off of Patreon yet, but I'm considering it. If anybody has any good similar platforms, let me know. I know Patreon's had a series of problems lately, so um, let me know what platforms you prefer. As my subscribers, I try to be out there on whatever platform you prefer to watch on. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter via Periscope, and we're also on Twitch. So, yeah. Let me know what platform you like to watch on. Subscribe on that platform. Hit the notification bell on that platform, and join us on our Patreon. You can even join for free and message us via Patreon if there's a topic that you want to cover. Um, and I think it's as little as $1 a month to subscribe. Um, so yeah, let me know where you want to see us, and we'll make it happen. And thanks to my special guest, Cubby Altabelli, who can be seen. Are you having an episode later today?
Yes, I'll be on twitch.tv/natural21 starting at 12:30 with Shoshana.
All right. So you can see him in a little bit over an hour on Twitch TV, talking crafts with Shoshana Ruth Green, who's been a guest on our show and is an amazing person in and of themselves. All right. Um, and that's all we have for today's episode. Tune in next week. We'll be back on with another special guest, another set of topics. We'll be talking more election news, definitely, because that's the only reason I'm coming back on in November, because this election is super important. And hope to see you then.